Hey guys, Alex here with Armadillo Armament. Today we are taking a look at the Solar Charging Rifle sight by Holosun. If you've been paying attention to this channel, you know that this magnifier and this SCRS were provided to me by Holosun. So these are going to be, while I would say unbiased reviews, do understand that this has been provided to me free of charge, and therefore I can't entirely be completely unbiased. That being said, I will give you guys all the pros and cons to this optic setup and this really cool optic setup that I have here for you today. Now, previously on the channel, I have reviewed this magnifier to very good, a very good review, to the point where if this was provided to me prior to me purchasing a G45 in my EOTech setup, I'd be very happy with this. This dot, I definitely have a little bit more to talk about here today, but I'm very glad to be sharing it with you guys here today. So what is the SCRS? Well, the SCRS is a 20 millimeter diameter red dot, particularly for rifles. Now, this isn't technically recommended to go on pistols. That being said, there are some channels that have successfully done that. I know Hop has talked about it. QVO Tactical has an excellent video on this as well. But this is more aimed towards a rifle setup. And I think this is an incredibly interesting optic. Now, I have been evaluating this over about a 6-month period, and I have close to about 700 rounds downrange with this optic, which is by all means a pretty low amount. Whenever I'm providing you guys a review on a optic, I've really tried to get it to about 1,000, if not more, especially when it comes to firearms. I want to have even more time on that firearm because I think a lot of issues can pop up over time. That's not going to be the case here. This is going to be a continued evaluation, but I will be providing you guys my first thoughts on this optic. So what do we have here? Once again, this is the SCRS. This is a 2 MOA green dot optic made by Holosun, and the gimmick behind it is the fact that it has the solar charging functionality. As you can see there at the very top, there is a solar charging panel, and this is actually a battery-less optic. So many optics, think of a EOTech, are going to be running off of a CR123A or a 2032 with a lot of other optics in this footprint size. This doesn't have that whatsoever, and I think that is what creates such a interesting kind of market for this optic that I will be getting into later. Now, let's get some of the boring stuff out of the way. All right, so going over the technical specs of the optic, once again, this is their SCRS Green 2, as you can see. They do have a MRS version, which does stand for Multiple Reticle System. This is, however, just the singular dot. If you are interested in their multiple reticle system, which is pretty interesting, especially on a rifle, you do want to purchase the MRS version. On a pistol, on a handgun, I don't necessarily think that a EOTech style reticle is very beneficial. It takes up a lot of real estate. On a rifle setup, though, the MRS definitely makes a lot more sense. Now, we do have the adjustment on the left. They are perfectly tactile. And they are not recessed, but they are not able to really get contact with, like, right? If you drop this on the ground, I have no doubt that this isn't going to change the reticle brightness, which is definitely an issue that some optics exhibit. It doesn't have a rheostat, which a lot of companies have chosen to really implement as a solution to this problem with a like raised portion around it, like a T2. That being said, as you can see here, it does have this little kind of like bumper plate around it, and if I drop this, there's really a 0% chance of it going off. Now, taking a look at the upper and right side of the optic, that's going to be your adjustment. It is going to use a Holosun tool. So Aimpoint has their own tool. A lot of other companies have their own tool. This is kind of like a flathead, so you can use a screwdriver, but you just want to use that Holosun tool that it comes with, and I find that it's pretty good quality, and this is 1 MOA clicks. Now, you'll see here that this does connect to the mount with a hex key. So that is very similar to something like a Acro, right? The Acro Key 2 does connect with their Acro mount. This is a 509T mount with that kind of like clamshell design. The Acro really does take after rifle optics in a lot of ways because of that. This is pretty similar, and this isn't obviously QD. The mount is semi-QD, we'll get to that in a moment, but this part is in QD, which just means that it's going to sit lower and a lot of the times be stronger. So I find this mount interface to be quite good, the 509T interface, and I've seen this on pistols that it is perfectly adequate. That being said, it is not going to be able to be ripped off your mount very easily. And now, speaking of the mount is very interesting as well. As you can see here, I almost liken this to, I think Tripp said it best, a like reptilia mount. It does kind of look very similar to it, and it is very solid. Now, I had previously a Romeo and then a SIG MSR, and those mounts just look really chintzy. I would say those are probably the largest failure points of those optics, is the mounts are just, the legs are very thin. This is very smart, right? They chose to have maybe not, 4 legs all the way around, but instead a very thick plus style design in the middle that is going to be very robust. Now, I haven't dropped this off ability to test it, but honestly, I bet this mount would live past the optic, the rifle, everything. Just look at it. It is very thick, and that's probably where a lot of the weight goes to. The weight, once again, if I haven't said it already, does come in at 2.45 ounces, which is incredibly light. We are talking just a little bit above pistol optics, right? And acro is, I think, about 2 ounces. RMRs are 1.2. And that is really what helps position itself as either a very small carbine optic or a subgun optic, which I will be speaking to in just a couple minutes here. Now, I do find that the coating on the lenses is perfectly adequate as well. Sun is not getting in there and completely destroying my sight picture. And speaking on the mount down here, this does have obviously a tightening screw, and that is really one of the only complaints I have on this optic today. I do not have witness marks here, just because I have been kind of taking it on and off a lot of rifles, and I don't want to put a witness mark on it. It's not going to be accurate. I will say that this has definitely gotten loose over time, not to the point where it's fallen off, but it has gotten a little bit loose. So you do want to proactively tighten that, put some Loctite on it, and witness mark it accordingly. Now, back to the mount, I do find that the mount does sit at a pretty good height. It is definitely not something like a 1.93 or a 2.26 that I am used to. I really have to dig my chin, my cheek into that firearm in order to get a proper head position. That being said, it is perfectly adequate for what it is. And previously in my magnifier review video, even though the magnifier was technically off, it was still able to perfectly see through that optic, so it's really a non-issue. So, with all that technical mumbo-jumbo out of the way, how's the shooting experience? Well, throughout this video, you have been seeing videos of me shooting this and trying to give you guys a POV, but that is to say, it has been pretty good. The tube diameter is shorter than something like a T2, and as such does have a slightly greater FOV. Nowhere near as good as a EOTech, which I still consider to be my favorite optic, but it is a perfectly adequate shooting experience, and I find that I'm not limited by the optic, which is something that you will see. I used to have a RMRCC, which is a phenomenal pistol optic, but it was very small, especially on a pistol, so I find it kind of limited my tempo in shooting. Rifles are obviously different than pistols, and rifles don't recoil nearly as much, and the recoil is very inline, so, we're talking apples to oranges here. That being said, this definitely does not inhibit me in any way whatsoever, except for one way. That is the fact that it is a green reticle. Now, I'm going to be very transparent with you guys. I do not like green reticles, and I should have told Holosun this. I used to have a 508T that had a green reticle that I didn't like whatsoever. I find that green washes out in the environment very, very quickly, very easily, with any vegetation whatsoever, as well as just a light background. I find that green gets really washed out, really difficult to see. Now, red, yes, I know that green is brighter, and I know that green is better for people's eyes, but red just has so much more contrast, and because of that, I always recommend red to anyone. If I'm being completely honest with you, I think green is kind of a fad, and I think people that like green, I'm not going to say they're wrong, but I will say that I feel like they haven't seen the light yet. So that is my chief complaint with this optic, is the fact that it did come in green, and I really don't prefer the color green. But besides that, the shooting experience has been great. Like I said, my dot is not leaving the window whatsoever, and this has been bumped around some bags, bumped around my plate carrier. I'm not doing any Aaron Cowan stress tests on this, but I have not seen any issues with this whatsoever. The glass is recessed on the inner and outer windows. Therefore, like rocks and debris or like a magazine on your carrier isn't going to smack into it nearly as much, or nearly, that's not really an issue that many modern optics exhibit whatsoever. So all that to say, it has been perfectly adequate. Now, when a magnifier is looking through this, once again, I spoke about this in the magnifier review, but magnifiers are kind of judged on the red dot that they're paired with. This is a perfect sight picture, guys. It's really a non-issue whatsoever. It's perfectly clear. Arguably, I would say, well, not even arguably, it is significantly more clear than something like the cheaper dots. Think of a MSR or a Romeo 5. I have also looked under this with nods. I don't have footage of that, but just take my word for it. It's perfectly adequate. Is it as good as an EOTech? No, EOTechs are uncharacteristically fantastic. But it is a perfectly fine sight picture. Just understand that because it is a tube design, LED design, and it is a smaller tube, you're not going to get as much light in. And once again, is it as good as an EOTech? No, but it is perfectly fine. So if you are planning on using this with nods, rest assured, it's not a bad idea whatsoever. The auto brightness that is built in with this is pretty good. I find that a lot of the times I am just going to use their manual adjust system. I prefer manual adjust, but the auto adjust is fine. If you like that, go for it. It doesn't have the front-facing sensor like a RMR AHD or a lot of newer optics, Holosun, the SCS actually. However, it will do a decent job. Like I said, I just find that I prefer to manually adjust mine because I want my dots to be brighter a lot of the time. Now, this does have the ability to put kill flashes on the tube, which I wanted to mention. It doesn't look like they're, I do see screw-in points. I'm not sure who makes those, if Holosun makes those, but you can buy them online. I have seen them online. And then once again, speaking of technology within this optic, this does have shake awake. Now, this is a little bit less necessary on the SCRS due to the fact that it is a solar charging unit, which I want to get a little bit further into right now. Because this doesn't have it does have an internal battery, it doesn't have a replaceable battery. This is advertised at having roughly 50,000 hours, but honestly, an infinite battery life. And that does kind of make sense. It's a little bit vague, but what they're saying is that every time you take this outside, it is going to be charging from that panel. Now, Holosun does have a lot of other pistol optics that do have that panel on there, and it's important to understand the differences between those. The pistol variants, a lot of the pistol variants, are just going to use that panel kind of in a backup mode. So if you run out of the external battery or that replaceable battery, like a 2032 as an example, you can potentially use this solar charger or this panel at the very top of the optic. With this, it is a little bit different. This will actually charge the capacitor inside of the optic, and as such, every time you go outside, every time you go to the range, every time you put this in your window, it is going to be charging. And that is going to lead me into my next point, and that is, where does this optic really sit in the market? And I think that's what makes this optic so interesting. So a lot of us are very fond of the ACOG. And why is that? Well, the ACOG has great glass, but really it's considered to be the end of the world optic. And a very large reason for that is the fact that it is tritium, right? It is powered by the sun, and it is powered by little particles inside the optic, which we're not going to get into right now. So fiber optic and tritium. That is excellent peace of mind. You know that in 10 years' time, you can grab your rifle and it's going to be functioning. Now, the SCRS is slightly akin to that, but in a different way, which I'll be getting into. I think this optic really positions itself well for a kind of like shit hit the fan setup, a setup that you don't need to proactively worry about changing batteries. My EOTech, I have to change batteries every 1,000 or so hours, and that kind of changes. Some of them are 2,000, but old EOTechs were hundreds of hours, right? And is that a big deal? No. I have so many 2032s, but the peace of mind that this is going to be sitting off unless moved, and then when I do pick it up, it is going to have a solar panel that is going to be intaking that light and providing me with a realistically infinite source of power is very interesting, right? It definitely positions itself to that end of the time rifle. Now, there is a downside with that. The ACOG is running off of a very simple fiber optic and tritium setup, whereas this is running off of a battery. Batteries do have a shelf life. Now, how long is that shelf life? It's impossible to say. This could hit the bed in 5 years, or it could last 30 years. There are reports online I've seen of these internal charging batteries lasting 50 years, if not more, right? Without them like dying yet. So realistically, it could last 100 years for all we know, right? And Holosun does make pretty quality stuff at the end of the day. So I have no doubt that this will last at least 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. But what's the likelihood of you putting down a rifle for 10 years and never touching it, right? So I do think this positions itself very interestingly as a kind of bug out rifle optic. Now, the second point I want to make is around the form factor, the weight, and really it lending itself towards a PCC. Now, this optic would be absolutely perfect on something like a MP9 or an MP7 or an MP5. Really, a lot of the MPs, probably an MP9 the most, just because of how small and compact that system is. This does have a cheek weld, right? So you're not putting a crazy high mount on it, which a lot of people prefer. I like my giraffe neck mount, but I understand people's perspective on that. But because this is so lightweight and the mount is pretty high quality and it is a bug out kind of system with its recharging capability, this would be absolutely perfect on an MP9. And I'll try to find a picture and I'll put on the screen right now of what this would look like. But I have this on an AR-15 right now. I think it's perfectly adequate on an AR-15, especially with a magnifier behind it. This is how I would set it up if I left it on this rifle, and I will be doing so. That being said, I have the full intent of buying an MP7 or an MP9 in the future. Definitely an MP7, but I want an MP9 in the future as well. And this would, like I said, be absolutely perfect on there just because the night vision capability is adequate. I don't have to worry about batteries. It has shake awake. It has auto on. I can put a kill flash on it. It is very small. It's a very good form factor. The mount is great. The lockup is great. I find the glass is great. There's really no negatives to it. And the only or the largest positives are the fact that I know I can put this in the back of my car. Not that I recommend truck guns, but I can put this in the back of my car or the backpack or just leave it in my closet and know that if shit does hit the fan, I'm really always going to have an optic that's going to be functioning. Now, wrapping up this video, I still love my EOTechs, and I still love my T2s, and I still have a lot of my pistol dots, my RMR, my Acro. And I do think if you put an Acro on a mount, it would be a great setup. I think if you put an RMR on a mount, or a T2 on a mount, or an EOTech on this, it would be a great setup. But because of the form factor and because of the technology inside this optic, I think it does make it stand out. And all of that with a very low price tag. This is going to come in at under $300, between $200 and $300. I see them online a lot of the time at about $220 to $250. Our Romeo 5s and MSRs are going to be between that $100 and $200 range. And because of that, I would really recommend that anyone that is kind of like serious into shooting wants to look at this optic rather than those cheaper optics. I have to imagine this is going to stand up better just because of how great that mount design is and just how rugged this system looks. Just by looking at it, you know that it's going to be a more rugged system. And if you know, you know. This is made out of 7075 T6 aluminum, if that wasn't mentioned already, which is perfectly adequate metallurgy. But once again, rounding out this review, this optic really has taken me by surprise. Yes, I hate the fact that it's green, and I wish there were, potentially different things about it. I would love Holosun to make a larger version of this, right? Akin to something like an EOTech. Maybe not as heavy and as big. Make it a little bit bigger, right? You guys make the 507 comp. And then you could make it with even more radical reticles, right? If you really wanted to go crazy. But overall, I have been very pleasantly surprised with this optic. I will continue to evaluate it. And I will definitely, once I have the opportunity, throw this on an MP5 or an MP9 and keep you guys updated. For any of you that are asking, well, should I buy it? The answer is yes. If you can find it on sale for $200, that is a steal. If you can find it for $250 to $300, honestly, I don't think you'll be disappointed. Holosun, thank you for sending me out this optic. I am very impressed with it. Alex, or This has been Alex with Armadillo Armament. I will continue to evaluate this and get back to you guys once I have some more rounds, but thanks for tuning into this video, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.